r/no sleep. Posted by you/TroncdeNadal. I worked for a secret research center. What is a little boy doing there? Part 1. I woke up and opened my bedroom's window. The sun was shining, the flowers in the garden were as colorful and beautiful as ever. What a lovely day. Good morning, my love, said my loving husband. Mommy. Daddy, yelled my beloved son as he burst into our bedroom with his stuffed bunny in hand and happily jumped into my arms. Happy birthday, dear, I said as I hugged him. You're already 7 years old. Wow, that's impressive for being dead. My husband added. Both him and my son began laughing afterwards as I stared at them in shock. My face went pale when I heard those words. They laughed, and laughed and laughed. Stop, I shouted, but they kept laughing louder and louder, until I woke up screaming. What a horrible nightmare, it was already the third one that month. My name is Maya, I'm from Finland. They say my country is one of the happiest in the world. I'm sure they must only speak for themselves, because if you analyze my life, well, you'll find I'm a bit of a black sheep among my apparently happy fellow Finns, to say the least. My childhood and most of my adolescence were pretty normal, but then came high school. I met a boy I found to be really nice, we had a really good chemistry and let's just say we got a bit carried away. I gave birth to a baby boy at 17 years of age. My parents were devastated and told me to abort, but I refused because I just couldn't bring myself to kill a potential human being. But then, the baby died just a few minutes after birth. My boyfriend couldn't handle it and left me shortly after. To say I was heartbroken would be an understatement. I sunk into depression and dropped out of school. I had originally planned to study physics, but I couldn't find the motivation to do anything anymore. At first, I did not like being pregnant, but during the 9 months I carried the baby in my belly, I started to grow attached to him and tried to make the best of it. I even imagined myself living with my son as a loving and caring mother in the future. Fast forward 5 years and my life wasn't going much better. I tried to move on and find a job, but all I could look forward to were dead-end minimum wage gigs I picked up for a few months until I got tired and jumped onto another one equally as miserable in a never-ending cycle. The fact I was still living with my parents while almost all my friends already had their own homes, partners, decent jobs and or were studying in college didn't help my self-esteem either. One of the only good things I recall from that period of my life was visiting the USA and learning English there, but that was about it when it came to my achievements. You're just 22 years old, Maya. You still have your whole life ahead of you. Things will get better, it's only a matter of time. My mother and father said, trying to cheer me up. My childhood friend Elsa came to the bar I was currently working at and approached me. Hi, Maya, she said. Elsa, long time no see. How are you doing? I replied. I've just finished college and have recently started working at a scientific research center. That's why I've come here. There's something important I need to tell you regarding this research center. Something important to tell me? What do I have to do with the research center? I'm just an underpaid barista. I replied. Exactly. And I'm offering you the opportunity to quit your job and to come to work with me, Elsa exclaimed. What? Elsa, I'd love to work with you if I could, but I have no studies. I'm not qualified to work at a research center. I replied, totally baffled. Don't worry, do you know how to clean stuff? Elsa asked. Yeah. I responded. Great. That's all you need. You see, they're looking for a janitor, and the pay is way bigger than whatever this bar is paying you. Plus, the facility has exclusive living quarters for its employees, so you can finally stop living with your parents. You should really consider it, Elsa said. Sure, thank you Elsa. I replied. At first I was hesitant, but Elsa's offer grew more and more tempting the more I thought about it. After seriously considering it and talking it through with my parents, I finally accepted it, packed all my things and met with Elsa the following day to go to that research center. The road trip to my new workplace lasted over 3 hours. The place was as isolated from civilization as it could be. It's no wonder the employees lived there. To this day, I couldn't tell you where it was located. I remember it was near a random forest somewhere in Finland, but that's it. How did you find out about this place? I can't imagine anyone finding it on their own. I asked. A classmate from college whose uncle works there told me about it, but yeah, it's pretty hard to find, isn't it? The boss says it's to prevent outside forces from interfering with our work or stealing stuff. Elsa replied. I know I'm just a janitor and I may not be qualified to ask this question, but what exactly do they research here? I uttered. Oh, all sorts of fascinating topics. Vaccines and medicines, synthetic food, nanotechnology, life on other planets, ways to stop global warming. There are various departments, from biology to physics to engineering. All sorts of things, I'm telling you. I work in the physics department. Anyways, we've arrived. Elsa answered. The research center was a huge complex composed of various prefabricated rectangular buildings. Everything was colored gray. It looked pretty bland and boring, but I guess that's because they prioritized practicality and efficiency over looks. After all, they couldn't brag about the complex's appearance to anyone outside its own personnel, so the design choice made sense. A man in his early 60s was waiting for us at the entrance. "Good day, Ms. Elsa. I suppose the other young lady that accompanies you is the janitor you told me about, am I right?" the man asked. "That's right, this is Maya. Maya, meet Dr. Friedrich. He's the person who founded this research center and the one in charge around here," Elsa said. "It's my pleasure, Ms. Maya. You're going to work with the most promising minds of the century, not just from Finland, but from the entire world," Dr. Friedrich exclaimed. "The pleasure is mine, sir. Well, it'll sure be nice to be around those promising minds, but I'm not one of them. I'm just the janitor. I wanted to study psychics and become a scientist when I was younger, but destiny had other plans for me, I guess," I replied. "Oh, don't say that. Without someone keeping the facility in good condition, the scientific breakthroughs made here would not be possible. You're contributing just as much as the researchers. In my research center, each and every one of my employees is important and deserves to be treated with respect," he stated. "Thank you, sir. I'll try my best," I replied. I was intrigued. If that research center was really teeming with brilliant scientists and was home to amazing scientific discoveries spanning multiple disciplines, then why was it so obscure? If Dr. Friedrich's claims were true, his facility should have been known worldwide, and yet, it seemed to be completely hidden from the public eye. Dr. Friedrich left and Elsa showed me around and took me to my new private apartment inside the facility, and I must say it pleasantly surprised me. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but it was larger than I had expected and it had all the essentials: a bedroom with a decent bed, a restroom with a toilet and a shower plate, a kitchen with a stove, an oven, a microwave and a refrigerator, and a living room with a couch, a TV and even Wi-Fi. I would be starting my new job the following day, so I ate a couple of fruits for dinner, phoned my parents to tell them everything was okay, and went to sleep, thinking about what my future would hold. My first day was nothing to write home about. I picked up my cleaning supplies and I just started going from department to department, sweeping up the place. I used my first day to get used to my new surroundings. I was mesmerized by the sheer size of the research center. It was comprised of multiple buildings and departments, each with multiple floors, hallways and chambers. It was about as big as a village. I also ran into Elsa, who was excited because her team of scientists and her were apparently working on a revolutionary new project. I asked her what that project was, but she admitted she wasn't quite sure of it herself. She had just started working there and was still learning, after all. I went to bed that day not truly appreciating how good it had been. This was the first and last day I would enjoy working at that place, because the day that followed was, well, let's just say it was when the things that prompted me to write this started to happen. The first hours of the day were as normal as they could be. I made my way through the complex, cleaning up the place, just like I had done the previous day. I took an elevator and descended to the lower levels of the physics, as it was the last place left to go to before the end of my shift. It was the place Elsa worked at, but to my surprise, I didn't see her anywhere. Silence and loneliness reigned supreme. It seemed there was no one around, at first. A young man that looked like one of the researchers was on his knees in the middle of a hallway, staring at the floor, weeping. "Hey, is something wrong?" I asked. Finding him there so suddenly had startled me. I had no idea what to do. The man raised his head and stared at me dead in the eyes. It was then when I noticed his eyes were bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept in days. I want to go home. Why you? Help me. Help. US. The man loudly exclaimed. What do you need?" I uttered, starting to get worried. "Shut the fuck up. She's an innocent person. I'm not a fucking psycho like you. I'm not gonna do it," he yelled even louder, but I'm not sure if he was replying to me, though. He sounded like he was talking to someone else, but to who? There was only the two of us in there. "Sir," I faintly whispered as I took a few steps back. Now I wasn't merely worried, I was scared shitless. I'm not myself. He controls. Kill her. No exclamation mark. Kill her. No exclamation mark. Kill her, kill her, kill her. The man shouted to the top of his lungs as he stood up. He began moving forward, crudely waddling towards me as if he was drunk. His facial expression conveyed pain and distress, as if he did not want to do what he was doing and was being forced to. I screamed and ran away at full speed, leaving my cleaning appliances behind and sprinting towards the elevator. I reached the ground floor and continued running towards my apartment. I locked myself inside, grabbed my phone and tried to phone Elsa, but there was no phone service. This couldn't be, the phone had been working just fine the previous day, so why wasn't it working? I attempted to make a call a second time, this time to the police. Nothing, no phone service. I sat on the couch with my heart racing and my eyes wide open. I could not sleep that night. I was absolutely terrified, and Finland's trademark frigid winter cold wasn't helping either. I nearly had a heart attack when I heard footsteps in the snow, coming from outside. I heard them entering the apartment block and tiptoeing inside the building, until they stopped, right outside my door. My whole body was trembling in fear. They knocked at the door twice. "Who's there?" I whispered in absolute terror. The person outside the door replied with an unintelligible high-pitched moan. "I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying." I replied. "Help, I'm scared and cold and lost, help, please." The mysterious person uttered. Their voice sounded like that of a child. I spent an entire minute in front of the door, deciding whether to open it or not. The voice did not sound threatening, but I still had goosebumps after the encounter with that man. I finally made up my mind and opened the door. Waiting for me outside was a little boy, no older than 7 years old. He stared at me with tears in his eyes as he shivered as a result of walking outside in the cold without proper winter clothing. He seemed to be wearing pajamas. A second later, he fainted in my arms. I dragged him inside, wrapped him in a blanket and put him to lay on the sofa. He woke up 10 minutes later. "Mommy?" he uttered as he slowly opened his eyes. "Sorry kid, but I'm not your mother. You came here asking for help, remember?" I said. "Oh, right. Where is my mommy? What have they done to her?" the boy asked worryingly. "I don't know where your mother is. What are you doing in this research center? I thought only employees were allowed to be here," I replied. At first I assumed her mother worked there and had brought him to work. But my skin went pale when I heard his reply. I was laying in my bed with my stuffed bunny, and then a bunch of scary people broke into my house and kidnapped me. I cried for my mommy, but they had caught her too. Then they put us both to sleep and I woke up in this weird place. It's full of scary people. A few of them saw me and chased me, but I ran away and then I found your apartment. If my phone had been working, I would have called the police without question after hearing what the little boy said. I was even inclined to take him with me and leave that horrible place, but then again, where would I go? I had no clue where that research center was in relation to the rest of civilization. All I could see when I looked through the window was an enormous snowy forest. Ugh! The little boy moaned as he put a hand on his forehead. "What's the matter? Do you have a headache?" I asked. "Yeah, ever since I woke up in this place, someone has been crying inside my head. It hurts." "What? I think you're just imagining things because you're nervous and scared. You just need to rest," I replied. "I can't rest. My mommy's still out there. The scary people still have her. Listen, I promise I'll help you find your mommy tomorrow. But we can't search for her if we're tired, we need to go to sleep. Come on, I'll let you sleep in my bed." Since the apartment only had one bed, we both slept on the same bed right next to each other. Fortunately, it was fairly big, so we had no problem sleeping together. I'm not gonna lie, I felt pretty uncomfortable sleeping with a random kid I had just met, but he didn't seem to mind, as he fell asleep pretty quickly. "Your mommy must be proud of you, boy. We'll find her, I promise," I whispered before closing my eyes and calling it a day. I worked for a secret research center. The number of missing employees concerns me. Part 2. "Hey! Wake up!" yelled a childlike voice right next to me. "Huh?" I sleepily uttered. "You promised me we'd save my mommy. Come on!" the little boy exclaimed as he shook my body. I finally snapped out of my drowsy state and remembered everything that had happened the previous day. "Oh, right, sorry, I overslept. Don't you want to eat something for breakfast first?" I said. "There's no time for that. My mommy's in danger," the boy replied. So I lent him a coat so he would at least be wearing something other than just his pajamas. We exited my apartment and entered the research center's main facilities. The place bustling with passionate young scientists and researchers I had seen when I had first arrived there was unrecognizable. It had transformed overnight, You'd be forgiven to think it had been abandoned for years. It was now empty and ominous, with broken equipment scattered all over the place and cryptic, eerie messages written on the walls. What have we become? Who is inside my head? Get out of my mind. All we could hear as we roamed the facility was the sound of our own tiptoeing. If you were those scary people, where would you hide my mommy? The boy asked. I don't know, we must be patient and keep exploring. I replied. My mommy always says, Leo, you have to work hard and be patient. He happily added. So your name is Leo? I asked. He nodded. It's a nice name. I'm Maya, by the way. Anyway, Leo, let's. But before I finished my sentence, I noticed Leo wasn't listening to me, as he was distracted by the human silhouette that could be seen at the end of a long hallway in front of us. An employee? That's what I first thought, but upon closer inspection, it became clear that person was another child, a little girl. Hey, look! A girl, Leo exclaimed. Yeah, do you know her? I asked. Nope, I've never seen her before. Leo replied. Hey, kid. Are you lost? Do you need help? I yelled at the girl. She stared at us for a second and then ran away. No, wait, I shouted, but she ignored me and kept running. Maybe she knows where my mommy is. We should follow her, Leo suggested. I agreed and we chased behind her. She turned around a corner leading to a big door with an eye-catching big sign above it, Management Department. We crossed the door expecting to see her, but she wasn't there. Even if she had kept running at full speed, there was no way she would have had enough time to get out of our range of sight so quickly. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air. The Management Department was a network of corridors and offices filled with elegant tables, chairs and shelves full of paperwork. It looked to be in slightly better condition than the rest of the complex, but that may just have been my perception being altered by the place's fancy decor as opposed to the dull aesthetic of the research center's other sections. The point is, just because it seemed to be a little bit less trash didn't mean it wasn't also trashed. We stumbled upon a certain office that sparked my interest, Dr. Friedrich's office. We decided to enter it out of curiosity and found it empty. Upon first glance, there seemed to be nothing of interest in there, but then my eyes were drawn to a note that was clipped to a bulletin board. Dr. Friedrich, I'm writing this letter to report something rather unusual I saw yesterday. You may already know about this, you're the boss after all, but still, I just have to write this down to make sure. I was right outside our facilities yesterday when I saw a pair of large vans arriving at the research center. The drivers were wearing our regulatory work uniforms, but there were also over a dozen people in each van which were not. What's more, most of them appeared to be asleep. I'm aware we've recently been hiring many new employees, but the men and women in those vans did not look like people coming to apply for a job. Are we hosting guided tours for tourists now? If so, I did not get the memo and this surprises me, Dr. Friedrich, because I've known you for many years and you've always been completely against the idea of opening the complex to the public. Privacy and secrecy has always been this research center's #1 priority. What shocked me the most was to see not only adults in the vans, but young boys and girls as well. As your personal advisor, I must say I do not think this research center is an appropriate place for children. If this is your decision, I highly suggest you to think of what you're doing and to consider the possible consequences of your actions. Sincerely, Dr. Camilla. Do you hear that? Leo whispered as footsteps could be heard in the distance. It was one of the employees, a man who was carrying a pen and was writing a message on the wall. We're all his guinea pigs. I told Leo to keep quiet and to not make any sudden moves, but he flinched. What's wrong? I uttered. It's the voice in my head, it's crying again. And it's even louder and more painful than last time. Leo replied. Like you just said, it's all in your head. Just try to relax and don't think about it. The man writing on the walls heard us and immediately dropped what he was doing and began searching for us. We hid inside an empty office and locked the door. We know you're there. We saw you. The man shouted as he roamed the halls and attempted to hunt us down, speaking in plural, for some reason. He stopped right outside our hiding spot and began violently banging on the office's barricaded door as we tried not to move a muscle. An unknown voice yelled something in the distance. The man trying to catch us suddenly stopped and left. After hesitating for a few seconds, we came out of our hiding spot and tried to pinpoint the source of that mysterious voice that had yelled before, but there seemed to be no one there. Well, what do we have here? Exclaimed a loud and distorted voice right behind us. The voice came from a middle-aged woman who was ominously standing before us, wearing a white lab coat and staring at us with a sinister grin and bloodshot eyes that reminded me of the man I had encountered the previous day as well as the other man we had just encountered. "Who are you?" I uttered as Leo grabbed me by the hand, clearly scared. "Greetings. We are Dr. Camilla. Forgive us if we sound harsh, we can barely think properly ever since we became what we are now because of that son of a bitch," the woman said. She was the second person in a row we had encountered that day that spoke in plural. I was starting to see a pattern. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this little boy is lost and we're searching for his mother. So, if you'll excuse us, we'll be on our way," I said, trying to keep a distance and getting ready to leave. "Hold on. You seem to be quite alone, right? Are you alone? Are you pure?" she asked. I'm with the little boy, there's two of us." "I don't understand your question," I replied in confusion. Alone in your mind. Don't you have a voice in your head? Another consciousness infecting your body like a parasite, driving you insane to the point you don't even know WHO or what you are anymore?" Dr. Camilla exclaimed, her tone and behavior growing louder and more erratic the longer she spoke. I firmly gripped Leo's hand and started walking away, gradually accelerating. I looked back and was shocked to see Dr. Camilla had vanished, not unlike the little girl we had seen earlier. We were tempted to stop, since there was no sign of Dr. Camilla, but we kept going, as I suspected she might have been hiding and waiting for an ambush. "It's nothing personal, dear, but if we could transfer the other entity inside this body to your pure body, we could get rid of the parasite and Dr. Camilla would be just one person again. We need you, to free us," Dr. Camilla shouted, suddenly appearing at the end of the hallway in front of us. I was speechless. How had she done that? She had teleported. Leo and I frantically ran around the management department as Dr. Camilla was on our heels. We once again resorted to the strategy of locking ourselves in an office until our pursuer left, blocking the door with a big desk. Unlike the offices we had seen before, this one was far from empty. It contained multiple desks and chairs, tons of paperwork scattered around, a computer, a printer, and several utensils such as pens and scissors. We prepared for Dr. Camilla trying to get in by force, banging on the door just like the man we had encountered before, but that didn't happen. No, what happened was much worse. The office's door abruptly swung open on its own despite the huge desk pressing against it. Dr. Camilla walked in and closed the door. "Fear not, dear, your sacrifice will not be in vain. Once you have freed us, we'll make sure that asshole known as Dr. Frederick pays for his crimes," she said as she closed in on me. I tried to keep a distance between us and looked for any way to flee, but there was no escape. I was cornered against a wall and Dr. Camilla was getting closer and closer, smiling. But then, when Dr. Camilla was so close I could feel her breath on my face, her twisted grin turned into a painful grimace as she fell to the floor. Leo had stabbed her in the back with the scissors we found inside the office. "Are you alright?" Leo asked. "Yeah, thank you," I replied as I stared at Dr. Camilla in shock. Hey, kiddo, I know why you're here. He did this to you too. The voice in your head, you hear it too, don't you?" said an agonizing Dr. Camilla as she bled to death on the floor. Leo then started to think about the voice inside his head. He started listening to it. He stared at me with tears of pain and fear in his eyes as he clenched his teeth and gripped his fists. Hey, Leo. Hey, kid, listen to me. Remember, it's all in your head, you have to calm down. Count to 10, breath in and out, I exclaimed, attempting to calm Leo down, but he didn't listen. He screamed and jumped at me, knocking me to the floor, aggressively and tightly grabbing my shirt by my chest. His whole body was shaking as he stared at me dead in the eyes. "Stop," I shouted. Upon hearing he abruptly let me go as he gasped in shock. His stare changed from that of pain to that of confusion. Did I just pounce at you?" he asked in complete shock. "Yes, what was that all about?" I replied, equally baffled. I don't know. I remember the voice inside my head started crying louder and louder until it was all I could hear. I tried to ignore it like you said, but it just wouldn't shut up and I couldn't take it anymore. Then it told me the only way to make it stop was to jump at you," Leo said. "Well, I'm glad you managed to snap out of it. Now that this is over, I think it's time to look for your mother elsewhere," I suggested. Upon exiting the management department, we were met by two blurry figures in the distance. One of them was the little girl we had seen earlier. She was holding hands with a woman. "Is that Mommy?" Leo uttered. I don't know, is she? But who is the little girl? I added, but Leo ignored my words and immediately rushed to his mother with a big smile on his face. No, wait, I cried, but it was no use. Mommy. Mommy, Leo exclaimed as he got closer to his mother and the little girl. But then, he stopped dead in his tracks as he witnessed something that left us both speechless. Both Leo's mother and the little girl vanished into thin air. Posted by you/TroncdeNadal. To all students attending my school, I know the new Japanese girl is super popular, but for your own sake, do not go near her. It all began with rumors passed down from student to student at recess. Apparently, we would soon be getting a new classmate coming from a foreign country. The exact country they were coming from was still unknown, though, just like their name or gender. We asked our teacher about our upcoming new classmate. She confirmed the rumors were true and told us the new student was from Japan, but she admitted she didn't know much else beyond their nationality, aside from the fact she was set to arrive in a few days. And thus, that fated Friday of March 2012, she arrived. The first time I saw her, she was standing right beside the school's front door. A small crowd had gathered around her. They listened as she talked about her and the reason she had come to America. My name is Hikari, it's a pleasure to meet you all, she said. Everyone began asking her questions. According to her, she had moved to our town because her parents were planning to open a Japanese restaurant chain in the United States and our town would be the location of their first restaurant. Apparently she came from a pretty wealthy family. Hikari was skinny and relatively tall. She had brown almond eyes and short brown hair. She was wearing blue shorts and a pink shirt with an illustration of a cute cartoon kitten on it. Boys and girls alike became instant fans, flooding Hikari with compliments. Your English is amazing for not being a native speaker. A boy praised her. I love the kitten on your shirt, it's so kawaii. A girl said, using the Japanese word for cute kawaii in an attempt to relate to her and forge a connection. How much money do your parents make? Another kid asked. Hikari did not reply to any of them. She didn't know what to say. She wanted to talk to everyone but she was too overwhelmed. Hello, I'm Maria, nice to meet you. I approached her. The chit-chat stopped. Everyone but Hikari cringed and stared at me as if they did not want me to be there. I was feeling pretty uncomfortable. Hikari was about to reply, but another girl interrupted her. Hikari doesn't have time for losers like you, Maria. Now scram. A girl from the crowd yelled at me. No, it's okay, she can stay if she wants to. Hikari uttered, but I had had enough. I left and went home in silence. Hikari seemed to be a nice person, but she had surrounded herself, whether she knew it or not, with toxic people who only pretended to be her friends because she was attractive and wealthy. My feelings towards Hikari were peculiar. I did not hate her, she hadn't insulted me and she had even invited me to stay, but I didn't like the people she hung out with and that made me not want to hang out with her. I had been living in the US since I was 5 years old, but I originally lived in Spain, but my reception when I came to America was very different from Hikari's. I didn't consider myself ugly, but I wasn't attractive either. I came from an average suburban family. I was terrible at PE. I was the only girl in my class who didn't join the cheerleaders club. I had niche hobbies like video games and horror literature. I was pretty good at history and I dominated Spanish classes thanks to my country of origin, but no one cared about those subjects. You could become a popular kid in my school if you were good at sports, had artistic talents, came from a wealthy family, smoked to pretend to be older and cooler than you actually were, you know, the usual. I did not have any of these traits. I was just your typical nerd who everyone knows but no one cares about. I was on my way to the local convenience store to buy some food for my mom when I saw a bunch of kids from school roaming around the town with Hikari. Hey, Maria, Hikari said as she waved at me. The other kids encouraged her to keep going and ignore me, though, so I silently and awkwardly waved her back and we parted ways. I could tell she wanted to be my friend, but at the same time she was letting herself be influenced and manipulated by those kids. Couldn't she see her so-called friends were clearly toxic? Was she really that weak-minded? Later that day, I was startled by the sound of my doorbell as I was curled up in my couch reading a horror novel. I opened the door, it was Hikari. Hikari, what a surprise, I said. Hi, Maria. I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say sorry. She apologized. Sorry for what? For not paying as much attention to you as I should. I want to be your friend, Maria, I really do, but... Hikari added. She sounded pretty sincere, but for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to finish her sentence. But what? I asked, encouraging her to keep talking. I also want to be with the others. She replied. Hikari, those people are not your friends. They only pretend to like you because they think you're attractive, exotic and rich. They don't see you as a real friend, but as a mere object or prize they like to be with because it makes them feel important and cool. But I need them. Hikari uttered after a few seconds of awkward silence, but it didn't sound like a reply to what I had just said. Instead, it was as if she was saying that to herself. Trust me, you don't. Anyway, thanks for having come all the way here to apologize. Do you want to come in? I said. She nodded after snapping out of her little trance and entered the house. It turned out Hikari and I had plenty of things in common. She was also very passionate about horror and history. She was really into monsters from Japanese mythology called yokai. She told me all about them and recommended me several books about yokai she thought would interest me. I recommended her the novel I was reading in return. I had a blast that afternoon. When I had first met her the day prior, I thought Hikari was going to be yet another kid that was too cool for me, and I was getting ready to live the rest of my days ignoring her just like how I ignored the rest. But she had gone out of her way to come to my house and hang out with me. I felt amazing. It's getting late, I have to go home. I have to get everything ready for the yokai party, Hikari said. What party? I asked without a clue of what she was talking about. I've organized a party themed around yokai at my parents' new restaurant tomorrow. I've invited every kid I met yesterday. Really? Awesome. I can't wait to see your restaurant. I've never been to a Japanese restaurant, you know? I said, really excited. I'm sorry, Maria, but you're not invited to the party. Hikari replied in a serious tone. What? But why? I asked in shock. I felt disappointed. I thought Hikari was my friend. Why wouldn't she let me go to her party? The only reason I could come up with was that she had been manipulated into not inviting me by the other kids. Don't get me wrong, you're awesome, Maria. You're a true friend, unlike the others. Then why can't I come to the party? I don't understand. I asked. I couldn't believe the conversation we were having. Don't worry, I don't expect you to understand. Goodbye. She uttered before leaving the house. The plethora of conflicting emotions I was feeling is hard to put into words. It was a strange combination of disappointment, betrayal and confusion. I checked social media the following day. A girl that had been invited to Hikari's party posted a picture of her and other boys and girls on their way to the Japanese restaurant, along with the text, "On our way to our first Japanese party. See you all there. Hikari rules. #Hikari #yokai. Another kid posted the location of the restaurant, except, there was something off about it. According to the post, the party took place in the outskirts of town. There was no restaurant there as far as I knew, but that didn't make sense. The restaurant must have already been built for Hikari to host a party there. I searched the location on Google Maps myself to make sure. Nothing. The nearest Japanese restaurant was located in another town miles away from ours. The only building that matched the coordinates was an old warehouse. I was extremely confused, without a clue about what was going on. Why would Hikari lie about her restaurant and lure everyone to an abandoned warehouse in the middle of nowhere? This couldn't be an accident. I remembered how strange Hikari had behaved when she had told me about the party the day prior. It was clear she had planned something, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. I left my house and headed to the supposed party's location using my mobile phone as a map. After 20 minutes of walking through the outskirts of town, I spotted a small hill in the distance with what looked like an old building at the top. I paused for a moment to check if the location was correct. According to my phone, this was it. I suddenly heard loud echoing screams which seemed to be coming from the hill. I rushed up there determined to find out what was going on. I slowly approached the abandoned warehouse at the top of the hill. I could hear weird noises coming from inside the dilapidated building. It sounded like someone aggressively tearing apart something while emitting some kind of animalistic growls. I peeked through a window. I nearly passed out when I saw Hikari hunched over a pile of corpses that were laying on the floor as she tore them apart like a hungry scavenger. Hikari? I whispered, completely frozen in terror. Hikari immediately dropped what she was doing with her former friends and eerily turned her head to look at me. Her appearance had changed. Her pupils were now vertical and thin, like the ones belonging to snakes and felines, and her teeth were abnormally sharp. They looked as if they had been specially designed for tearing apart human flesh. She stood up and began slowly advancing towards me as she growled, her eyes locked onto me like those of a hawk, her shirt soaked with the blood of her foolish victims. I ran away without a second thought, frantically descending the hill as I screamed with tears in my eyes. I dropped my phone, but I didn't care. I wasn't even sure if she was chasing me or not, but I kept going, My vision was blurred by the wind pressing against me as my eyes were soaked in tears. Hikari's ear-piercing roar coming from the warehouse was the last I'd ever hear from her as I rushed down the hill. The kids who were last seen on their way to Hikari's party were never found, neither alive nor dead. Hikari had also disappeared. In fact, there seemed to be absolutely no evidence she ever existed. Our teacher entered the classroom accompanied by a boy I had never seen before. "Hello, everyone. Remember how I told you a Japanese kid would soon join us last week? Well, meet Hiro." Hiro introduced himself to the class as I stared at him in absolute confusion. Posted by TroncdeNadal. Every kid leaves the park at sunset, except for one. Our village's park had been the go-to place for local kids to hang out for decades. It had picnic tables, a fountain, a slide, a seesaw, a pair of swings and a ton of hiding spots perfect for a good old game of hide-and-seek. What more could you ask for? A train station had once occupied its place circa the late 19th century, which remained in operation until World War II. After that, the terrain was left abandoned for many years until it became the village's iconic park in the early 1960s, and the rest is history. An afternoon spent in the park after hours of boring teachers and math exercises was an afternoon spent in paradise for my friends, and I emphasis on afternoon, because every kid in town knew what happened after 8 p.m., or rather, who appeared. Every day after sunset, a silhouette that heavily resembled a little boy could be seen sitting on one of the swings. For adults, it was nothing more than an optical illusion caused by the shadows that nearby street lights casted onto the swings, but if you asked us children, there was clearly something else going on there. Most adults couldn't see anything at all there. When it came to teenagers, a bunch of them did manage to make out a blurry humanoid shape, but nothing else beyond that. However, several young boys and girls reported they were able to tell apart details such as the boy's hair and clothes. It was a cold November afternoon. It had been an awesome day. I was having fun at the park with my friends, keeping a beautiful crimson bracelet in my pocket I planned to give to my crush Anna later that evening when she would come to my house for dinner along with her parents, who had been friends with my parents since they had been our age. My house's doorbell rang. My mother opened the door and welcomed Anna and her parents in. I sighed as I stared at Anna with my eyes wide open, as if I was caught in a trance. She was beautiful, with her long brown hair adorned with a big red bow, with her bangs and the freckles on her cheeks that complemented her precious smile, not to mention she had an amazing personality, often helping me with my homework. I just knew we were made to be together. "Fantasizing about your crush, eh?" asked my older brother playfully. "What? She's not my crush. This has nothing to do with you," I exclaimed, but my brother rolled his eyes and smirked. "Yeah, right. Because you're totally not blushing right now," he sarcastically pointed out. I stopped talking, ashamed I had been exposed. My brother chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm going to hang out with my friends tonight. I won't get in your way." "Okay, you got me. I'm going to give her this," I said, putting one hand in my pocket. "Nothing, the bracelet wasn't there." "Is something wrong?" my brother asked after noticing the panicked look on my face. I nodded nervously. "I lost the gift I had bought for her. I must have left it at the park. Dinner isn't ready yet, you might be able to find it if you go there now," my brother suggested. I checked the time, 7:50 p.m. "But, it's almost 8 p.m. I uttered, thinking about the infamous urban legend. My brother smirked. "Aaron, please. I don't blame you, every kid in town believes in him at some point, but I assure you the Shadow Boy is just an eerie light trick, he's not real." My brother had once believed in the Shadow Boy during his childhood back in the mid-1980s, but he became a boring, skeptical grown-up like the rest when he reached high school. His cell phone suddenly rang. "Well, my friends are calling. Good luck with your crush," he said before leaving the house. Anna, her parents, my parents and I sat down and started eating and chatting. Everyone was having a great time, but I couldn't stop thinking about the lost bracelet. I was seriously starting to consider my brother's advice. I had planned my declaration weeks in advance. I couldn't let it all go to waste. "I'm sorry, but I have to go. My teacher just sent me an important email." "I can help you if you have homework," Anna said. No thank you, I'm fine on my own, thanks," I nervously replied. And so, I grabbed a slice off the cake my mother had made for dessert. I put on my coat and rushed to the park. It was quite ironic. A few hours earlier the park had brought me joy and peace, but now it was a place of darkness and dread. It was quiet, too quiet for comfort. All I could hear was the sound of my own tiptoeing. I couldn't help but feel I wasn't alone. "Does that cake taste good?" A high-pitched whisper broke the silence, echoing through the night. I froze and frantically looked around for the source of the mysterious voice, but found no one. That is until my eyes were drawn to the swings. There he was, the shadow boy. "And your coat, is it warm?" I heard the voice again, only this time it had a clear origin. The shadow boy was talking to me. His whole body was completely black, everything about him, his skin, hair, shirt, shoes, he was as dark as the night sky above us, like a living shadow, to the point he would have been nearly impossible to spot if it weren't for the street lights that dimly lit the park. I stared at him speechless and frozen in place as he sat in one of the swings, immobile. "Who are you?" I finally managed to utter after having spent a minute considering multiple possible ways to react to him. It's unpolite to answer questions with more questions. My mommy used to say that to me all the time. The shadow boy replied. "I'm sorry." I answered, desperately trying not to make him mad. I didn't know what he was capable of and that was terrifying. I could feel the tension was making me sweat. "It's okay. You're someone I can talk to and I like that. Why have you come here, though?" It was then when I noticed he was holding something pretty familiar in his right hand. My bracelet, and his bracelet. "I'm here for that. I'm afraid I need it, can you please give it back?" I asked. "But I've just found it today, it's my new toy. I also needed to have fun, I haven't had fun in a while, you know? But you know what would be even more fun? Getting out of this park. But it seems I'm not allowed to do that, at least not without someone taking my place," the shadow boy said before looking at me in the face and smiling. I took a few steps back, I did not like where this was going. "But, you don't understand, it's for the girl I love. Please, you have to give it to me. If you want the bracelet, you can have it. But you'll have to stay here so I can get out of the park. I know, we'll play hide and seek. If you win, you can stay here with the bracelet, if you lose, you'll take my place without the bracelet, deal?" "You don't get it. The bracelet's not for me, I need to both have the bracelet and leave all at once." "The deal is sealed. Alright, I'll start counting to 100 while you hide. 1, 2, 3. The shadow boy started counting. It seemed he couldn't care less whether I wanted to play or not. I started running as soon as he closed his eyes. Not running to find a hiding spot, but running to get out of there and save my life. It sucked that I couldn't get back Anna's bracelet, but I was smarter than that. I wasn't going to gamble away my life in a game of hide and seek with a ghost. "Where are you going?" "You have to hide inside the park. Have the planes come back?" the shadow boy said right when I was about to reach the park's exit. I looked to my right and nearly had a heart attack when I saw the boy had left the swing and somehow teleported right next to me. I stopped running, fearing he would retaliate in some way if I kept going. "Only inside the park, understood? Please, forgive me. Also, what planes are you talking about?" "You see, back when there were trains here, I came to say goodbye to my daddy. He's a soldier who had to go stop some bad guys, you know? After he left I heard some weird noises coming from the sky and everyone started screaming and running away and a loud siren started playing. It turned out a bunch of planes were flying towards the train station," the shadow boy said. "And you didn't run away like everyone else?" "Why would I? I love planes. Plus, they made me laugh. Those pilots must have been pretty bad because they dropped their cargo. I did not manage to see what they dropped clearly, but I remember it was very big and heavy and loud. Then everything went boom. For some reason. The next thing I remember is waking up here, all alone," the shadow boy replied. "Anyway, where were we?" he added. "Oh, yes. I have to count to 100 again and you have to hide only inside the park, okay?" He returned to the swings and started counting all over again. I sighed in reluctance. The shadow boy had warned me, I had no choice but to oblige and play his game by his rules. I looked around for hiding spots. It's not that there weren't any hiding spots, I knew the park like the back of my hand, my friends and I had been playing hide and seek there for years. But the shadow boy was a spirit who had been there for decades, he probably already knew all of the hiding spots I knew. How do you hide from someone like him? I had to fool him somehow. I took out my coat and placed it behind a tree, I then ran to the opposite side of the park and hid inside a huge bush. I felt pretty cold without the coat, but it was a price I was willing to pay. I curled up into a ball and hoped for the best. The shadow boy stood up and began his hunt. I could hear him as he slowly but surely roamed the park with his eyes wide open with a playful smile plastered on his face. He even started humming at one point. The tension and dread I was feeling hidden inside the bush, desperately trying not to move a muscle as I heard him get closer and closer cannot be put into words. The fact that it was a life or death scenario for me while he treated it like a fun game made that whole situation even scarier. "Can't hide from me," he yelled. I heard him stop dead in his tracks when he was at the center of the park. He let out a childish chuckle and started running. My heart was racing. Had he found me? I peeked out from inside the bush, expecting to see him rushing towards me. But instead, he was actually running towards the opposite side of the park, towards my coat. I couldn't believe it. My decoy had worked. I could see the exit from inside bush. I was relatively close to it, whereas the shadow boy was at the other end of the park. Maybe if I rushed to the exit now that he was distracted, perhaps I could make it. It was very risky. I still remembered he could teleport. But if I managed to get to the exit in time without him noticing, the thought of that was just too tempting. I peeked from inside my hiding spot one last time, to make sure he was still far away. The coast was clear. It was now or never. I hopped out of the bush and immediately sprinted towards the exit at full speed without looking back. "Hey, there you are. Come back here, cheater." I heard the shadow boy shouting in the distance. I was just mere inches away from the exit. I ignored his words and kept going. I finally managed to get out of the park, but I still continued running until it was no longer in my range of vision, just to make sure. I let out a sigh of relief when I arrived home. "I think you owe us all an explanation, mister," my parents said with frowns on their faces when they greeted me. I could explain, but you wouldn't understand, I said, exhausted and painting. "Oh, Aaron. Of course we understand, we also had an adorable love story of our own back in the day. So, did you manage to find the bracelet?" My parents replied, smiling. I raised my eyebrows in confusion. How did they know about that? "I'm sorry, bro. Everyone got very worried once they found out you had left the house. I got worried too when I came back and you still hadn't returned. I just had to tell them," my father said, breaking into the conversation. "Where's Anna?" I asked. "That's what we were about to tell you. She just left 5 minutes ago once she learned about the whole bracelet thing. She said she was going to the park to give you a pleasant surprise." My skin went pale when I heard that. I was indeed surprised, but the surprise was as far from pleasant as it could be. I rushed back to the park without a second thought. I ran even faster once my paranoid, nervous and terrified mind started conjuring a plethora of horrible thoughts and scenarios involving Anna and the shadow boy. I was beyond exhausted, but I had to keep going, for Anna. I finally arrived at the park after sprinting across the village like a maniac. "Anna! Anna!" I cried to the top of my lungs. I fell to my knees. What I saw left me in tears. If you visit my village today, you'll find that kids these days no longer speak of a shadow boy haunting the park, but of a shadow girl. The children that live near the park claim they can sometimes hear her crying and weeping. There are some that even say they've heard her faintly uttering a certain name, even though no one knows for sure who is she calling or why. But her appearance seems to be something practically everyone agrees on. A young girl with long hair and bangs, wearing a big bow on her head and a bracelet on her wrist. Posted by you/TroncdeNadal. Snowstorms are deadly in more ways than one. The weather forecast said it loud and clear, a brutal snowstorm was coming our way, a blizzard that had seldom been seen in our local area, given its temperate climate. We were already accustomed to having cold winters, but the low temperatures were usually a product of the chilly wind and the humid atmosphere. It rarely ever snowed. In fact, it hadn't snowed in over 2 decades, and even in the extremely exceptional cases where it had snowed in the past, it hadn't come anywhere close to the historic snowfall the forecaster had announced. The townsfolk reacted with awe and fascination. We children were ecstatic. We finally had the chance to play in the snow, just like we had seen kids do on countless movies and TV shows. A few people, however, were in disbelief. They thought a blizzard of such magnitude was impossible in our town, given its climate, geographical location and previous history with snow, with some even calling the event unnatural. I woke up that January morning of 1994 and immediately jumped out of bed and peeked through the window. To my disappointment, it wasn't snowing yet, but I still had hope. After all, the day had just started, there was still plenty of opportunity for it to snow. After having breakfast, I spoke with my best friend Theo on the telephone. He asked me if I wanted to go out to play with him, to which I happily said yes. "Where do you think you're going, Missy?" my mother said as I was about to open the front door and exit the house. "I'm going out to play with Theo," I yelled. "Have you forgotten about the deadly blizzard that's coming our way? The weather forecast recommends we should all stay at home, warm and cozy." "But Mom, It's not snowing yet. I promise I'll come back before the blizzard starts, I said, trying to convince her to let me go. I understand you're a little girl and you want to play, and that's fantastic and completely normal for a child your age, but today is not a good day for that. Safety comes first. My mother replied. Oh, please. It'll be just a moment. I've already told Theo I would go, I exclaimed. My mother let out a long sigh of reluctance. Fine, I suppose it's not dangerous if there's no snowstorm yet, but please be careful, dear. My mother said. I nodded in response. Thanks, Mom. Hey, wait a minute. I'll let you go, but that puny cardigan you're wearing won't protect you from the cold. Hold on a second, come to my room. She added before forcing me to bundle up with an ugly and thick fur coat that belonged to her, a long woolen scarf that took 4 laps to wrap around my neck, a woolen hat and a pair of mittens. I look ridiculous in these. This coat is so ugly and old-fashioned, I bet I wasn't even born yet when you purchased it. And this scarf is so uncomfortable, I exclaimed. It doesn't matter. It's not about looking good, it's about staying warm. If I want you to wear these, it's because I love you. You'll understand if you become a mother someday. Alright, you're all set. Can I go now, please? Yes, don't keep Theo waiting. But stay safe. And promise me you'll come back if it gets too cold, okay, sweetie? Sure. Bye, Mom, I said as I left the house. Amber. I heard Theo shouting my name across the street. I waved at him and approached him. Hi, Theo. Are you excited for the snow? I asked. You bet. But we'll have to wait a bit for that. Say, I've never seen you wearing these clothes before. Is the coat new? It's the exact opposite of new. I'm not wearing it by choice, my mother forced me to. I hate it. It's not that bad. You look funny, but in a good way. Thanks, I guess. But the less you remind me of what I'm wearing, the better. Anyways, what do you want to do while we wait for it to snow? I know, we could go to the forest. Theo suggested. The forest? Don't you think that's a bit too far away from town? I replied. So what? Come on, Amber. The forest is small and there's no dangerous wildlife, what's the worst that could happen? Besides, what else is there to do? Can you think of anything more interesting? Okay, you got me, I got nothing. Fine, let's go to the forest, I said, before following Theo to the forest, slightly reluctant. Even though there was still no trace of snow, it was still pretty cold. Fortunately, we were both well equipped with winter gear that made the cold tolerable. As much as I hated my winter clothes, my mother was right, they were doing a stellar job keeping me warm. If I had gone outside with just my cardigan I would have gotten hypothermia for sure. A huge cloud appeared in the sky as Theo and I roamed the local forest. Snowflakes soon began falling down, that was it, the snow had finally arrived. Look, Theo. It's snowing, I yelled in excitement and joy. Yay! This is awesome! He replied as he tried to catch snowflakes with his tongue, equally delighted. However, our fun was soon to end when the beautiful and pleasant snowfall quickly increased in intensity and turned into a violent storm. Okay, this is too much. We have to go home, I exclaimed. Theo nodded in approval and we started making our way home. But then, the endless barrage of snow was joined by a strong frigid wind, and soon, the entire forest was engulfed in a brutal blizzard. We could no longer keep going, we were trapped inside the forest. We must find a place to hide until the storm stops. It's impossible to get out of the forest right now, Theo said. We sprinted across the woods, desperately seeking refuge, holding hands so as to not get separated. Wait, do you feel that? I uttered. Feel what? The wind and the snow? Yeah, we're stuck in a snowstorm. It's kinda hard not to. Theo ironically replied. No, I'm talking about something else. I've just felt an eerie breeze right behind me. It may be just me, but I feel like we're being watched, like some sort of weird energy. This storm, there's something off about it. I added. Whatever you say. Hey, look. A cave. Amber, we're saved, Theo shouted. We instantly ran to the cave and hid inside without a second thought. As bundled up as I was, the clothes my mother had given me were not enough. We weren't prepared for such a brutal blizzard. No one could have prepared us for it. It was unlike anything our town had ever seen before. I was freezing. I could tell something was not right about that storm. It just didn't look natural. How long have we been in this cave? I asked as I rubbed my hands together in an attempt to keep myself as warm as I possibly could, which wasn't much. I'm not sure, probably an hour, maybe 2. Theo replied as he was trying to make fire with a pair of sticks, but was failing miserably. I broke into tears thinking about my mother. Theo did the same shortly after as we hugged each other, in part to comfort ourselves and in part to seek warmth. The snowstorm raged on outside the cave with no signs of stopping or even slowing down. It was then when it appeared. At first I couldn't believe it. I seriously couldn't believe it. I thought I was about to freeze to death and I was starting to hallucinate as a result. I closed my eyes and shook my head in denial, believing that if I pretended it wasn't real, the hallucination would go away, but it was still there. Some kind of spectral entity made out of wind and snow was standing outside the cave. The creature looked like a vague humanoid figure, with a torso, a pair of arms and legs and a round head without facial features. I could see the individual snowflakes and the gust of wind that composed it flowing continuously through its body in a loop, completely independent to the rest of the blizzard. It was like a small tornado of snow, but in the shape of a human. Theo, are you seeing what I'm seeing? I asked as a way to figure out if I had gone insane or not. Yeah, you can see it too? Is it real? Is it a ghost? He uttered, just as shocked as I was. I don't know. I replied, frozen in a combination of cold and terror. Hello? Theo yelled at the creature, but it did not respond. It just stood there, ominously. The snow phantom extended its left arm towards us, as if it was trying to reach out to us. I suddenly felt the same breeze I had felt before, coming from behind, except now it made no sense because we were in a small and enclosed cave with no holes or cavities. There was no place that breeze could possibly be coming from. The mysterious breeze gradually became stronger until it started pulling us towards the creature. We tried to resist in any way we could, but there was nothing we could do. We were like pieces of metal being attracted to a magnet. We were getting closer and closer to the snow entity, who still reached out to us with its arm and kept pulling us towards itself with its supernatural wind. It stood still like a statue as we cried, gripped our teeth and closed our eyes, coming to terms with our imminent and inevitable fate. A collection of loud voices could be faintly heard in the distance. It sounded like they were coming from inside the forest. It was clear the phantom had also heard them. It quickly took the child that was closest to it and floated away, fading deep into the blizzard. Theo's horrifying scream as he vanished alongside the creature was something that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Mere seconds after that, the snowstorm suddenly ceased. The voices grew even louder and were now accompanied by footsteps. I wanted to shout for help, but I was so cold it was impossible to articulate words. My teeth were chattering. I didn't have the energy to do anything beyond shivering uncontrollably as I waited to die. First, I lost my sense of hearing, then the world around me lost its color until I could only see shades of gray. Finally, I fell to the ground as my vision became blurrier and blurrier until it was all darkness. It took me a little while to process where I was and what had happened after I regained consciousness and opened my eyes. To my surprise, I wasn't in the cave anymore, but in my bedroom. I was lying in my bed, tucked under several layers of blankets with a hot towel on my forehead. It was then when I noticed my mother was sitting on a chair right next to my bed, weeping. "Mom," I uttered. She gasped and stared at me with a smile as tears ran down her face. "Amber. Oh, honey, you had me worried sick. How are you feeling?" she said. "Sorry, Mom, I should have listened to you. Ugh, I feel horrible, everything's spinning," I replied. "You've caught one heck of a fever. It's my fault, sweetheart, I shouldn't have let you go, I should be the one saying sorry. But don't worry, it's all over now, I'm here for you, you'll recover in no time." A policeman I had never seen before entered the room. "I see you've woken up. Are you okay?" he asked. I silently nodded, even though that wasn't really true. "This policeman and his men found you unconscious in a cave, deep inside the nearby forest. I contacted Theo's parents, we called the police and we all began searching for you. Even neighbors volunteered to help," my mother explained. "I'm glad to see you're okay, kid. But that's the thing, I'm only seeing you. Your mother told us you went out to play with a boy, correct?" The policeman interrogated me. "Yes, we both went to the forest and then we got caught in the blizzard and we went to hide in a cave. And then, I confessed before memories of that snow phantom came back." "Then what?" The policeman encouraged me to continue, noticing I had not finished my sentence. "He came out of the cave and got lost in the storm, and then I blacked out. It all happened so fast," I continued, holding back the tears. The search for Theo in the forest continued for a few more days, but it was all in vain. After I recovered from my fever, I wore the fur coat every single day to school during the rest of the winter. I didn't care if the other kids laughed at me and thought it was ugly, it held too much significance to let it go. It hasn't snowed in my town ever since, but if it snows again someday, if that thing returns, you can be sure I'm staying indoors, and if you ever hear of an unusual blizzard approaching your local area, you know what to do.